Sometimes a person comes home not because they missed the place, but because they need to know whether one good thing survived after they left. The stagecoach rolled into Red Creek beneath a sky bleached white by the Arizona sun. Dust followed it like smoke. Men outside the feed store stopped talking. A woman carrying flour paused beneath the boardwalk shade. Even the blacksmith let his hammer fall silent as the coach groaned to a stop beside the hotel. Then the door opened. Eliza Red Hawk stepped down. 7 years had passed since anyone in Red Creek had seen the Apache chief's daughter. The city had changed the cut of her clothes. Dark traveling coat, polished boots, a small leather case in one gloved hand. But beneath her collar, half hidden against her throat, rested the same turquoise pendant her father had given her when she was 16. Some things the city had not taken. A man leaning against the saloon rail gave a dry laugh. City finally send you back where you belong? Eliza looked at him once. Nothing more. That silence somehow embarrassed him more than any answer could have. Before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you believe justice can ride quieter than a gunshot, hit like and follow. Now, back to the story. Eliza stepped into the middle of Red Creek's main street. The wind lifted a strand of black hair across her cheek. Wagon wheels creaked nearby. Somewhere behind the hotel, a horse stamped against dry earth. She studied the town as if searching for a grave. Then she asked the station driver one question. Is Caleb Mercer still alive? The driver blinked. Half the street heard her. By noon, everyone would. 20 miles north, Caleb Mercer knew nothing about the woman who had just spoken his name. He was standing alone beneath the hard sun, staring at a fence post. His fence post. It had bothered him since sunrise. The marker stones showed the boundary 3 feet east of where his father had built the fence years ago. 3 feet was nothing to most men. To Caleb, 3 feet of land that did not belong to him was 3 feet too much. He wrapped both hands around the weathered cedar and pulled. The post groaned loose from the earth. His horse watched from beneath a cottonwood while Caleb dragged it back toward the proper line. No witness. No sheriff. No Apache rider standing on the ridge. Just a man correcting something nobody else would ever have known was wrong. Then hoofbeats came fast along the southern trail. Caleb straightened. A ranch boy named Tommy Hayes rode toward him hard enough to throw dust over the sage. Mr. Mercer. Caleb wiped his palms against his trousers. What burned down? Nothing. Tommy reined in, breathing almost as hard as the horse. Stage came in from Tucson. Caleb waited. The boy swallowed. Eliza Red Hawk was on it. For the first time that morning, Caleb stopped moving. 7 years disappeared in a single breath. He saw a younger woman beside a creek. Sunlight on black hair. A silver coin turning between her fingers. Keep it until I know what home means. His hand moved unconsciously toward the small coin hanging beneath his shirt. Still there. Still waiting. Tommy leaned forward. She asked for you. Caleb looked south toward Red Creek. The wind moved through the grass between him and town. Slow. Dry. Restless. What did she want? Tommy shook his head. She wouldn't say. And somewhere deep inside Caleb Mercer, an old promise suddenly felt heavier than silver. Caleb Mercer reached Red Creek just before sunset. The town had changed color by then. Morning dust had turned gold beneath the sinking sun, and the long wooden fronts of the stores threw narrow shadows across the street. Somewhere inside the saloon, a piano stumbled through the same 3 chords over and over. Caleb tied his horse outside the hotel. He did not need to ask where Eliza was. He saw her through the front window. She sat alone at a small table near the wall, one hand resting beside a cup she had barely touched. For 7 years, Caleb had remembered her as a girl standing barefoot beside a creek. The woman inside the hotel was not that girl. The city had sharpened her. Not hardened. Sharpened. She carried herself differently now. Straighter. Quieter. Like someone who had learned that the world often listened more closely when a person stopped trying to be heard. Caleb stepped inside. The floorboards complained beneath his boots. Eliza looked up. Neither smiled. For a moment, the room seemed to empty around them. Caleb. Eliza. 7 years. 2 names. That was all they gave each other. He removed his hat. She noticed the dust on his sleeves. He noticed the fine stitching on her coat. Then her eyes moved lower, toward the thin leather cord visible at the opening of his shirt. Caleb saw the exact moment she recognized it. The silver coin hung beneath the cord, worn smooth at the edges now. still pierced through the center where she had pushed a nail through it beside the creek years ago. Her eyes stayed there half a second too long. You kept it. Caleb glanced down. Seems I did. She looked away first. Outside, a wagon rattled past. The silence between them had weight, not awkwardness. History. Caleb pulled out the chair across from her. Tommy said you asked for me. I did. You crossed half the territory just to make a ranch boy ride himself half dead. Something almost like a smile touched her mouth. Tommy always did like drama. That was the first familiar thing she had said. Then it vanished. Eliza reached down and touched the turquoise pendant beneath her collar. Caleb remembered that, too. Her father had given it to her the summer before she left. 2 objects. Silver between them. Turquoise against her heart. Proof that neither of them had forgotten as much as they pretended. Eliza leaned back. I need 1 day of your time. Caleb studied her face. No fear. No desperation. That concerned him more. 1 day usually means trouble. This time it means the truth. Caleb's fingers stopped against the brim of his hat. What truth? Eliza looked toward the hotel window. Across the street, 2 men had already found reasons to stand outside the mercantile and stare in her direction. She lowered her voice. Not here. Caleb followed her gaze. Red Creek had always been small. Small towns did not need walls. They had eyes. When? Tomorrow morning. Where? The courthouse. That surprised him. He expected canyon country. Apache land. Maybe her father's camp. Not the courthouse. Eliza rose and reached for her leather case. Caleb stood with her. Then she paused. Her eyes dropped once more to the silver coin beneath his shirt. Do you remember what I told you when I gave you that? Caleb did. Every word. But he said nothing. Eliza studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded as if his silence had answered enough. Good. She walked past him toward the stairs. Caleb turned. Eliza. She stopped without looking back. What happened in the city? Her hand tightened around the leather case. When she finally answered, her voice was quiet. It taught me how men steal things without ever drawing a gun. Then she climbed the stairs. And Caleb Mercer stood alone in the fading light, suddenly wishing she had asked him for something simple. The courthouse smelled of old paper, lamp oil, and dust baked into pine boards. Caleb Mercer arrived before 9. Eliza was already there. She stood beside a long table near the records room, her dark coat folded across one arm, 3 maps spread open beneath her hands. Morning light came through the tall windows in pale strips, catching the edges of the paper and the turquoise at her throat. Caleb closed the door behind him. You always this early? Eliza did not look up. Only when someone is trying to steal a valley. That got his attention. He stepped closer. The first map was old, hand-drawn, creeks marked in blue ink, property lines in fading black, Apache land to the east, ranch parcels to the west. The second map was newer, cleaner, straighter. Wrong. Caleb leaned over it. What am I looking at? Eliza placed one finger on the river. This. The line on the newer map followed the present channel. Caleb frowned. That creek moved after the flood. Exactly. 10 years earlier, heavy spring water had torn through the valley and shifted the channel nearly half a mile south in some places. Every rancher in Red Creek knew it. But paper did not remember storms. Men decided what paper remembered. Eliza slid a third document toward him. A list of debts. Names. Ranches' mortgages. Caleb recognized half the families. Henderson. Miller. Hayes. His own name sat near the bottom. He looked at her. Where did you get this? In Tucson. From who? A clerk who liked talking more than he liked his employer. Caleb's jaw tightened. At the top of the page was one name. Silas Whitmore. Banker. Land buyer. The kind of man who never raised his voice because money usually did it for him. Eliza spoke quietly. Whitmore has been buying ranch debt for 8 months. Small pieces. Nothing anyone would notice. Caleb looked again. One ranch at a time. One ranch at a time, she said. Then he filed a new survey using the creek's present course. Caleb understood before she finished. If the new boundary held, Whitmore could claim the spring and the narrow pass beside it, the only dependable water route through the southern valley. His eyes moved across the map. This isn't about ranches. No, it's about the water. Eliza finally looked at him. The railroad survey comes through next year. Caleb went still. Red Creek had been waiting 10 years for rumors of a railroad to become real. If tracks came through the valley, land beside water would become worth more than cattle. More than crops. More than most families could imagine. Whitmore was not buying dirt. He was buying tomorrow. Caleb straightened. So you came back to stop him? I came back because the city taught me something. He waited. Eliza folded one corner of the map flat. Men like Whitmore don't need to hate Apache people. Her voice stayed calm. That would require feeling something. She tapped the debt list. He only needs ranchers to distrust my people, and my people to distrust ranchers. Caleb looked through the courthouse window. Across the street, Silas Whitmore was stepping down from a polished carriage. Black coat, silver watch chain, not a grain of trail dust on him. Eliza followed Caleb's eyes. He needs both sides angry enough to stop asking who profits. Whitmore looked toward the courthouse. Saw them. Smiled. Caleb felt something cold settle beneath his ribs. What do you need from me? Eliza gathered the papers slowly. For the first time that morning, hesitation crossed her face. Not yet. Caleb frowned. You dragged me here for truth. I did. Then give me all of it. Eliza met his eyes. The rest is going to cost you something. Outside, Whitmore started across the street. And Caleb suddenly understood why Eliza had asked for only one day. She did not need much time. She needed one decision. Silas Whitmore entered the courthouse without removing his hat. That told Caleb enough. Men who respected a room usually respected what happened inside it. Whitmore respected neither. His boots crossed the pine floor slowly, polished black leather making almost no sound. He stopped beside the table and looked down at the maps. Then at Eliza. Then at Caleb. Well, his smile was thin. Red Creek does attract unusual partnerships. Eliza folded the debt list once. Carefully, Caleb watched Whitmore's eyes follow her hands. Not her face. The papers. That told him even more. Whitmore leaned against the table. Miss Red Hawk, I heard the city educated you. It tried. And now you've come home to teach us? No, she met his gaze. I came home because you were counting on everyone here being too divided to read. The smile left his mouth. Only for a second. But Caleb saw it. Whitmore straightened. Those documents belong to private offices. Some do, and some don't. Eliza said nothing. Whitmore turned to Caleb. You ought to be careful, Mercer. Caleb kept his hands at his sides. About what? About confusing sympathy with loyalty. The room went still. Whitmore stepped closer. The bank holds your note. There it was. No gun. No threat shouted across the street. Just 6 words. Caleb felt them anyway. His ranch. The north pasture. His father's barn. The cottonwood where his mother had been buried. Whitmore's voice softened. Winter was poor. Cattle prices were worse. I've been patient. Eliza's expression changed. Not fear. Understanding. She had known there would be a price. Maybe not this price. Whitmore continued. You sign a statement confirming the current river channel as the recognized boundary, and I can extend your loan another 3 years. Caleb stared at him. And if I don't? Whitmore adjusted one glove. Then perhaps the bank becomes less patient. Outside, a wagon rolled past the courthouse. A dog barked somewhere down the street. Ordinary sounds. That was the cruel part. A man's life could be threatened while the world went on buying flour. Caleb looked at Eliza. What exactly were you going to ask me? Her eyes held his. I need someone who remembers where the creek ran before the flood. There are 50 men who remember. 50 men who owe Whitmore money. Caleb's jaw tightened. And me? You knew the old surveyor. He did. His father had ridden boundaries with him. You also have the original fence markers on your land. Caleb said nothing. Eliza lowered her voice. If you testify, the new survey falls apart. Whitmore gave a quiet laugh. If he testifies, his ranch falls apart. That landed harder. Caleb looked toward the courthouse window. Across the valley, beyond the roofs and telegraph poles, lay the land his family had worked for 23 years. Dry, stubborn. His. Or almost his. Eliza began gathering the maps. Slowly. I won't ask you. Caleb looked at her. She closed the leather case. You already know what it costs. There was no anger in her voice. That made it worse. Whitmore smiled again. There. Sensible. Eliza turned toward the door. Caleb felt the silver coin beneath his shirt. 7 years old. Light as nothing. Heavy as judgment. Eliza. She stopped. He wanted to tell her he needed time. Wanted to explain the ranch. The debt. His mother's grave. All the reasonable things a man could lose. Instead, the wrong words came out. I can't. Eliza stood still. For one breath. 2. Then she looked back at him. Her face was calm. Too calm. Then I was wrong about you. She walked out. Whitmore remained beside the table. Satisfied, Caleb stayed where he was. And for the first time in years, the silver coin against his chest felt less like a memory and more like something he had failed to earn. By sunset, Red Creek had chosen sides. Not officially. No meeting had been called. No notice nailed to the courthouse door. It happened the way division usually happened in small towns. Quietly, one rumor at a time. By 4 o'clock, men outside the feed store were saying Chief Red Hawk planned to push ranchers off the eastern valley. By 5, someone swore 20 Apache riders had been seen near Miller's pasture. By 6, the number had become 40. Caleb Mercer heard every version. None of them matched the truth. He stood outside the mercantile with a sack of grain over one shoulder, while 2 ranchers argued beside the hitching rail. They want the water. They always wanted the water. Whitmore says he's got documents proving it. Caleb almost laughed at that. Whitmore had documents proving whatever kept men frightened. Across the street, Eliza came out of the hotel. 3 people stopped talking. She noticed. Of course she noticed. But she kept walking. A ranch wife pulled her young son closer as Eliza passed. The boy stared at her with the open curiosity children had before adults taught them what to fear. Then another child appeared near the alley. An Apache boy, maybe 9. He had come into town with an older man to trade hides. The 2 boys recognized each other. Caleb saw it. A small nod. Maybe they had played near the creek before. Maybe children did not care which side of a survey line water came from. The ranch woman noticed too. She pulled her son away. At almost the same moment, the Apache elder placed a hand on the other boy's shoulder and guided him in the opposite direction. 2 children. 2 hands. 2 directions. Caleb watched until both disappeared. Something inside him turned sour. That evening, 12 ranchers gathered outside Whitmore's office. Lanterns burned along the boardwalk. Voices grew louder. Across town, several young Apache men had stopped near the southern trail, watching from horseback. Nobody drew a weapon. Not yet. But hands rested too close to holsters. Caleb stood between neither group. That bothered him more than anything. He rode home after dark. The ranch looked the same. Barn. Windmill. Cottonwood. The low house his father had built before Caleb was born. Everything he had been afraid to lose. He stepped inside and lit one lamp. The silver coin rested against his chest. He pulled it free, turned it between his fingers. Then his eyes moved toward the old cedar trunk beneath the window. His father's things. Caleb had not opened it in years. The hinges groaned. Inside were tax papers, cattle receipts, a broken compass, 2 letters from his mother. And beneath them, a narrow leather notebook. Caleb froze. He knew that cover. His father had carried it whenever he rode with Thomas Bell, the territorial surveyor. Caleb opened the first page. Fence measurements. Creek bends. Marker stones. Dates. Then he found the year of the flood. A hand-drawn boundary crossed the page in faded pencil. The old creek. The real one. His breathing slowed. Whitmore's survey was wrong. Not questionable. Wrong. And this notebook could prove it. Caleb sat in silence while the lamp hissed beside him. His ranch might still be taken. His debt had not disappeared. Nothing had become easier. But now the choice was no longer between Eliza and his land. It was between fear and knowing the truth while pretending he did not. Caleb closed the notebook. Outside, thunder rolled far beyond the desert hills. He reached for his hat. And this time, when he rode toward Red Creek, he did not bring a gun. He brought his father's handwriting. Eliza Red Hawk was still awake when Caleb Mercer knocked on the hotel door. 3 knocks. Slow. Heavy. She opened it with one hand on the latch and the other near the lamp. Caleb stood in the hallway, hat wet from the first drops of rain. He held a narrow leather notebook. Nothing else. Eliza looked at it. Then at him. I found something. She stepped aside. The room smelled faintly of cedar soap and old wood. Her maps still covered the small table near the window. Caleb placed the notebook beside them. Eliza opened it. 1 page. Then another. Her eyes changed. Not surprise. Recognition. She had spent too many years reading records to mistake the weight of an original document. This is your father's? Caleb nodded. He rode with Bell before the flood. Eliza turned to the boundary sketch. The creek curved exactly where the older territorial map said it should. Old marker stones were listed by distance. Fence posts. Cottonwoods. A limestone outcrop. Everything Whitmore's new survey had ignored. Eliza looked up. This is enough. Caleb's jaw tightened. Then I'll testify. For a moment, neither moved. Rain tapped against the window. Eliza closed the notebook. You understand what he'll do? Yes. He can call your loan. Yes. You could lose the ranch. Caleb looked toward the dark glass. His reflection stared back at him. Older than he felt. More tired. I know. Eliza studied him. Yesterday, he had refused her. Tonight, he stood there offering the only thing that might cost him everything. You don't owe me this. Caleb gave a short breath. No. He touched the silver coin beneath his shirt. I owe myself something. Eliza's eyes followed the movement. The room went quiet again. Then she said the one thing he did not expect. I never came back to ask you to save us. Caleb looked at her. What? She moved to the table and opened her leather case. From inside, she removed 3 folded envelopes. Each bore an official seal. Tucson, Territorial Land Office, Railway Survey Board. Caleb stared at them. Eliza spoke calmly. I sent copies of Whitmore's altered filings before I ever boarded the stagecoach. Caleb did not understand. Then why the maps? To confirm what I already suspected. Why my testimony? To make the truth impossible to bury here. He stepped closer. But you said you needed me. I did. Caleb's voice hardened. For what? Eliza did not answer. Outside, thunder rolled over Red Creek. The hotel walls seemed to shrink around them. Caleb looked at the sealed documents. Whitmore was already cornered. Maybe not finished, but wounded badly enough that the territorial office would come asking questions. Eliza had known that. She had not come home helpless. She had not returned looking for a white cowboy to fight her battle. She had built her own case before Red Creek even saw her face. Caleb felt something shift beneath his anger. Respect. And something more uncomfortable. Something personal. You could have told me. I could have. Why didn't you? Eliza looked toward the window. Down on the street, lanterns burned outside Whitmore's office. Men still gathered there. Across town, Apache riders still waited in the dark. 2 sides preparing for a fight neither needed. Eliza turned back. Because I needed to know something first. Caleb waited. She placed one hand on his father's notebook. Her fingers rested. Beside his. Close. Not touching. What? Eliza's eyes held his. For the first time since she returned, the certainty in them disappeared. Just slightly. Whether the man I remembered was real. Caleb went still. The rain grew harder. He wanted to ask what that meant. Why 7 years mattered. Why she had carried his memory all the way to the city and back. But before he could speak, hoofbeats stopped outside the hotel. Several horses. Then more. A voice shouted from the street. Mercer. Caleb moved to the window. Lantern light flickered below. Silas Whitmore stood in the rain with 6 ranchers behind him. And across the far end of the street, Apache riders were beginning to appear. Eliza came beside Caleb. Neither side knew the truth yet. But by morning, everyone would have to choose what mattered more. Fear or facts. By morning, the courthouse steps were full. Ranchers stood on one side of the street. Apache families and riders gathered on the other. No one had planned it that way. That was the dangerous part. Fear had arranged them better than any sheriff could. Caleb Mercer arrived on foot. Eliza walked beside him. Neither spoke. The rain had passed before dawn, leaving the boards dark and the air smelling of wet dust, horse leather, and creosote. Sheriff Amos Reed waited at the courthouse door. His eyes moved from the ranchers to the Apache riders. Then to Caleb. Tell me this stays quiet. Caleb looked at the crowd. I can tell you I'll try. Inside, every bench filled. Silas Whitmore stood near the front table in a black coat. Dry now, composed again. He had brought a lawyer from Tucson. Chief Eliza Red Hawk sat 3 rows back. He had not spoken to Eliza since arriving. Caleb noticed that. Father and daughter. 10 feet apart. A whole world between them. The hearing began with papers. Whitmore's lawyer spoke first. Property lines. River channels. Debt obligations. Words clean enough to make theft sound respectable. Then Whitmore stood. This is not about race, he said. Eliza's expression did not move. It is about lawful ownership. A rancher in the back nodded. Someone on the Apache side muttered under his breath. Sheriff Reed raised a hand. Quiet. Whitmore turned toward Caleb. Mr. Mercer can settle this easily. Caleb rose. The room changed. He walked to the front table. Every boot step sounded louder than it should have. Whitmore smiled. Tell them where the river runs. Caleb looked down at the map. Then at Eliza. Then at the men behind him who had shared cattle drives, funerals, bad winters. He knew what some of them were thinking. Choose us. Across the room, Apache elders watched him with the same question in their eyes. Choose them. Caleb reached to his gun belt. Sheriff Reed stiffened. Several men did the same. Caleb slowly removed his revolver. He placed it on the table. Wood against wood. One sound. The whole room went silent. Then Caleb took out his father's notebook and placed it beside the gun. One of these settles nothing, he said. His hand rested on the leather cover. The other might. Whitmore's smile disappeared. Caleb opened the notebook. He read the old measurements. Marker stone to cottonwood. Cottonwood to limestone. Limestone to the original creek bend. Dates. Distances. Names. Not opinions. Not rumors. Facts. Whitmore's lawyer objected. Eliza produced the territorial map. Sheriff Reed called Thomas Bell's surviving deputy. The old man confirmed the handwriting. Then another rancher stood. I remember that cottonwood. An Apache elder rose next. So do I. A widow named Eleanor Hayes spoke about the flood year. Then Miller. Then a former survey hand. One voice became three. Three became seven. The room that had entered divided began remembering together. Whitmore tried to speak over them. No one listened now. Caleb watched the power leave him slowly. Not with a punch. Not with blood. With signatures. With memory. With men admitting they had been afraid enough to believe what was convenient. At last, Sheriff Reed gathered the documents. This survey is suspended pending territorial review. Whitmore went pale. Outside, someone exhaled. Then another. No cheering. No victory cry. Just people realizing they would not have to bury anyone that day. Caleb turned toward Eliza. She was watching him. Not smiling. Not yet. He stepped closer. You had the case without me. Yes. Then. Why did you need me? Eliza looked toward the open courthouse doors. Beyond them, ranchers and Apache families were beginning to leave through the same street. For the first time, no one seemed sure which side belonged to whom. She looked back at Caleb. Because papers could prove Whitmore lied. A pause. They couldn't prove you were still the man I remembered. Caleb said nothing. Eliza's eyes dropped to the silver coin beneath his shirt. Then back to him. And now I know. The courthouse emptied slowly. Not because anyone wanted to stay. Because nobody knew how to leave after being wronged together. Men who had spent the morning glaring across the aisle now avoided each other's eyes. Apache elders stepped into the sunlight without ceremony. Ranchers gathered their hats and papers in silence. Silas Whitmore left first. No one stopped him. No one needed to. For a man like Whitmore, being ignored was its own kind of defeat. Caleb Mercer remained near the front table. The revolver was still there. So was his father's notebook. Eliza stood beside the open window. Outside, Red Creek had already begun breathing again. Wagons moved. Horses stamped. A woman reopened the bakery shutters. Justice rarely looked the way people imagined. Sometimes it looked like a town going back to work. Caleb picked up the revolver. Then the notebook. You had enough evidence before you came here. Eliza nodded. Enough to start an investigation. And enough to stop Whitmore. Eventually. Caleb studied her. Then why risk coming back? Eliza looked toward the street. Chief Nanton stood near the hitching rail below, speaking quietly with Sheriff Reed. My father told me not to. Caleb almost smiled. That sounds like him. He said the city had already given me another life. Did it? Eliza took a long breath. The answer took longer. The city gave me rooms with locked doors. Books. Teachers. People who knew my name before they knew my father's. She touched the turquoise pendant at her throat. But every room wanted part of me left outside. Caleb said nothing. She continued. In Red Creek, I was the chief's daughter. A pause. In Tucson, I was the Apache woman who spoke too well. Her mouth tightened slightly. Different cages. Better curtains. Caleb looked down at the floorboards. He understood enough not to pretend he understood all of it. That mattered. Eliza turned toward him. 7 years ago, before I left, everyone told me the same thing. What? That people only respect difference until respecting it costs them something. Caleb's fingers closed around the notebook. She stepped closer. You were the one person who made me wonder if they were wrong. The silver coin rested beneath his shirt. Caleb felt it before she looked at it. So you came back to test me. Eliza's eyes hardened. No, that answer surprised him. I came back to find out whether the memory was true. Caleb frowned. There's a difference? Yes. She looked at him fully now. A test expects failure. The room went quiet. I hoped you wouldn't. Caleb absorbed that. He thought about yesterday. His refusal. Her face when he said he could not help. I nearly did. I know. I chose the ranch first. I know that too. There was no cruelty in her voice. That made the truth easier to hear. Caleb looked out the window. What if I'd stayed afraid? Eliza answered without hesitation. I still would have stopped Whitmore. He turned back. There it was. The thing he finally understood. She had not returned for rescue. She had not returned because she needed a cowboy to stand between her and danger. She had come carrying her own proof. Her own plan. Her own courage. Caleb had only been the unanswered question. So what did you want from me? Eliza looked at him for a long time. Then her eyes softened. To know whether a man could lose something and still refuse to take what wasn't his. Caleb said nothing. She glanced at the silver coin. And there was one other reason. His heart moved strangely. What reason? Eliza stepped past him. At the doorway, she stopped. Almost turned. Almost spoke. Instead, she gave the faintest smile. Keep wondering, cowboy. Then she walked into the sunlight. Caleb remained alone beside the old table. For the first time in 7 years, he understood that the silver coin had never been waiting for her answer. It had been waiting for his. 3 months later, the fence still had one rail missing. Caleb Mercer had meant to fix it. He told himself that every morning. Then cattle needed moving. The north trough cracked. A storm tore shingles from the barn roof. Winter grass came thin, and the bank sent 2 letters before finally sending none. By then, Silas Whitmore was gone from Red Creek. The territorial office had frozen his land claims. 2 clerks in Tucson had testified. 3 ranchers recovered parcels they thought they had lost. No one threw Whitmore in the street. No one dragged him behind a horse. He simply left town one cold morning with fewer men willing to shake his hand than had greeted him when he arrived. Out west, that could be punishment enough. Caleb kept the ranch. Less of it than before. The corrected boundary took back a strip along the eastern creek, just as his father's notebook said it should. He signed without complaint. Some men called him foolish. Others stopped saying it after Apache families began using the same water crossing as the ranchers without trouble. The first week felt uneasy. The second felt ordinary. By the third, children had stopped noticing which side anyone came from. That afternoon, Caleb was repairing a broken hinge when he heard hoofbeats. One horse. Unhurried. He looked up. Eliza Red Hawk rode through the cottonwoods. No stagecoach. No city coat. She wore a dark riding skirt, weathered boots, and the turquoise pendant at her throat. Caleb rested the hammer against his knee. Took you long enough. Eliza dismounted. I was beginning to think you enjoyed waiting. That depends. On what? Who I'm waiting for. She gave him a look that made him regret the sentence and enjoy it at the same time. Then she walked toward the boundary fence. Caleb followed. The missing rail left an opening wide enough for one person to pass through without climbing. Eliza stopped beside it. You never fixed this. Caleb looked at the empty brackets. Didn't seem necessary. Your cattle disagree. They've got better manners than most people. She almost laughed. Almost. Across the creek, 2 Apache children were filling clay jars while Tommy Hayes helped steady one. Against the current. No one called them back. No one watched from the ridge. The water moved around their boots, clear and shallow beneath the late sun. Eliza looked at them for a long time. My father says the agreement won't last. Caleb nodded. Probably won't. She turned. That doesn't bother you? Everything breaks eventually. He touched the fence post. Doesn't mean you stop building. The wind moved through the cottonwood leaves. Eliza's eyes dropped to the silver coin around his neck. She stepped closer. Caleb did not move. Her fingers found the leather cord. For one breath, the years between them seemed to return. The creek. The old summer. The girl leaving for the city. Keep it until I know what home means. Eliza lifted the coin over his head. Caleb watched it fall into her palm. So that's it. She studied the worn silver. No, from her pocket. She drew a new leather cord. Stronger. Darker. She threaded the coin through it. Then placed it back in his hand. Now you can keep it. Caleb looked at her. You figured out what home means? Eliza glanced toward Red Creek in the distance. Then toward the Apache Hills. Then back at him. I figured out it isn't always a place. Caleb closed his fingers around the coin. Neither said anything after that. They did not need to. Eliza stepped through the missing rail. Not into Apache land. Not into Caleb's land. just through an opening someone had decided no longer needed closing. Caleb followed. Behind them, the fence remained standing, one rail missing, enough space for a person to cross. And in the last light of evening, that small empty space seemed worth more than all the land Silas Whitmore had ever tried to own.